Most people don't end up living where they think they will when they move to Charlotte. They just don't. People move here thinking they are absolutely going to live right in Uptown, and 6 months later they are looking in South Charlotte, Huntersville, or even Fort Mill because real life starts to kick in. Other people come here dead set on lake life. They are picturing mornings on the water, sunset, boat rides, dinner on a patio overlooking Lake Norman. And once they start mapping out their week, they realize that they may want to visit the lake all the time, but living on it full time is a different decision. And then you get the buyers who say they want brand new construction right near the city. And then they realize that a lot of the newer homes with neighborhoods and amenities that they want are going to be farther out in places like Denver, Concord, Sherrills Ford, Mooresville, and farther out, depending on what they're after. Now, this happens all the time. It is not because people are doing anything wrong. It is because once your real routine starts to show up, commute, groceries, airport access, schools, traffic, space, walkability, and just your day-to-day lifestyle start mattering way more than the version of Charlotte that you had in your head from Zillow, Google Maps, or a weekend trip. So in this video, I want to break down the biggest patterns that we see with people moving to Charlotte. Because once you start to understand these patterns, you start getting a lot more clarity on where you would actually fit in. And honestly, that is when this move starts getting easier. So pattern number one is the people that move here dreaming about lake life. And this one is incredibly common. A lot of people find Charlotte through Lake Norman. Maybe they see Davidson, maybe they hear about Cornelius, maybe they come across Mooresville or Huntersville, and maybe they see all these waterfront homes, the marinas, the restaurants on the water, the boating lifestyle, and they think that this is it. That is exactly where I want to live. And listen, I get it. Lake Norman is a huge draw. It is one of the biggest lifestyle advantages in this entire area. And if you want water access, boating, lake views, golf cart communities, in certain pockets, country club options, and that more laid back feel while still being tied into a major metro, there's a lot to love about it. But then real life starts. And what I mean by that is this. Your job may not be in Lake Norman. Your spouse may not be working there either. Maybe one of you needs airport access. Maybe your kids are going to all these different activities all over the place. Maybe you start realizing that going from one side of the lake area to another can take longer than it looks on the map. Maybe you realize that if you want to be on the water or even very close to it, the pricing is going to change pretty fast as well. So what happens? A lot of people still want lake access, but they do not necessarily need to live right on the water. That is when they start looking at places like Huntersville, Denver, certain parts of Mooresville, or even South Charlotte if they want to be able to drive up to the lake when they want to, but keep their daily life a little easier. Because for a lot of people, the lake ends up becoming part of their lifestyle and not necessarily their exact address, and that is going to be a big difference. There are absolutely people who should live in Davidson, Cornelius, Mooresville, no question about that. But there are also a lot of people who come here thinking lake first, and then they realize that what they really want is access to Lake Norman without having every single part of their life revolve around it. And that happens all the time. Next up, you have your uptown dreamers. These are people coming from places where they are used to being closer in. Maybe they are coming from Jersey City, Chicago, DC, Boston, maybe parts of New York, maybe even just a lot more walkable areas from somewhere else. And when they think about Charlotte, they picture sleek apartment buildings, city line views, walking to dinner, being close to sports, grabbing coffee downstairs, and having a lot more of that urban energy. And to be fair, uptown Charlotte absolutely has a lot of that. You have the skyline, you have Panthers games, Hornets games, concerts, events, bars, restaurants, offices, all that. But then they get here and they start asking the real questions. Do I actually want to live in uptown every day? Do I want to be near uptown, or do I just want to be able to go there when I want to? Because those are not always the same thing. A lot of buyers end up realizing that they do not need uptown as their mailing address. They just want it to be a part of their lifestyle. So instead of uptown, they start leaning towards places like the South End, Plaza Midwood, Dilworth, Noda, or even South Park, depending on budget and what kind of setup they want. Some people want that close-in lifestyle, but with a little more neighborhood feel. Some want restaurants and social energy without feeling like they are in the center of everything all the time. Some want a yard, some want quieter streets, some want easier parking, and some want to be close to the city without feeling swallowed by it. And that is a huge thing that people do not realize until they actually get here. They do not always want that most suburban version of Charlotte. They want the version that gives them enough access to the city while still matching how they actually live. And that is why a lot of people who think they want uptown end up loving neighborhoods that are around it way more. Another really common one is what I would call the new construction buyers. And Charlotte definitely has a lot of these, all right? These are the buyers who say, I want something clean, modern, open floor plan maybe, tall ceilings, everything new, no major projects, and I want it to be easy, and that does make total sense to me. A lot of people relocating do not want to move here and immediately deal with updating a house from the 1980s. Replacing old windows, redoing the kitchen, or wondering when the HVAC is going to go out when it's 94 degrees in the summer. So they naturally start leaning toward new construction. Now, the thing is, in Charlotte, a lot of the time once you start chasing brand new, you are also chasing a certain type of location and a certain type of neighborhood setup. And what I mean by that is this, right? Usually the more brand new you want, the farther out you're gonna have to go, depending on your budget. Or if you do want new construction closer into the city, your price point is gonna jump up significantly. So then people start realizing that brand new construction is not just about the house, it is about the full lifestyle that comes with it. Do you want a master planned neighborhood? Are you okay with an HOA? Do you want a pool, a clubhouse, walking trails, and everything else that feels polished and brand new? Do you want bigger lots, or are you okay with being pretty close to the neighbors? Are you okay with being in an area that is still building out? How important to you are mature trees? How far do you want to be from Costco, Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, the airport, your office, or the places that you actually go every single week? That is when the search starts changing. Because some people realize that they love the idea of new construction, but they do not love where that puts them geographically. And other people realize that is the exact opposite. They end up loving the newer communities because they want simplicity, amenities, and a home that just works. So then their search shifts into places like Waxhaw, Concord, Denver, Mooresville, Indian Land, Fort Mill, or other outer ring areas depending on what side of Charlotte makes a lot more sense for them. And again, not wrong, just more specific, and that is the pattern. People start by saying they want a new house, and then they realize that they really need to decide in what kind of new construction lifestyle they actually want. And real quick, if you are enjoying this video, please consider liking and subscribing, as I do make 2 videos each week talking about what it's like to move to or live in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And as much as I do love making these videos, I am also a licensed real estate broker here. So if there is anything I can do for you, please reach out with the info below. With that being said, let's jump right back into the video. Now, next we have the suburban buyers who secretly end up wanting more of the city. And this is a real one, because on paper, the suburbs can make a lot of sense. More house for the money, more yard, more neighborhood feel, possibly better school options depending on where you are looking, potentially quieter, potentially newer homes, potentially easier parking, easier storage, maybe a 3-car garage, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of the people moving here think that is automatically the right answer, especially families. But then they get here and they start living. Now all of a sudden they realize that they really like being able to go out to dinner without a whole production. They like being near better restaurant clusters. They like being able to get to events faster. They like being closer to the airport. They like the idea of the weekend energy, and they like being able to bounce into South End, Uptown, South Park, or even just their favorite part of town without having to block off half the day for driving. And suddenly that perfect suburb out on paper does not feel quite as perfect for the way they actually spend their time. So some of these buyers start pushing back inward, not necessarily all the way back into the city, but a lot closer. That is how people end up comparing places like Mooresville versus Huntersville, or Fort Mill versus South Park, or even Denver versus being on the east side, because they start realizing that the house is only one part of this decision. And the other part is how your week is actually going to feel. And I really think that is one of the biggest themes in all of Charlotte. You are not just choosing a house, you are choosing your friction or your convenience. You are choosing more space or more proximity. You are choosing more peace and quiet or quicker access to the things that you actually enjoy. And that trade-off is where a lot of people end up surprising themselves. And then there is the forever home mindset. This is another huge one. Almost everyone that moves here says the same version of this. We want this house to be our forever home. And I get it, especially if you're moving from out of state. This is a big decision, a big move, a lot of money, big life shift. Of course you want to get it right the first try. But what I see all the time is that people put a lot of pressure on themselves to solve the next 20 years in one move. And that's pretty hard to do, because life is going to change. Your job's going to change. Kids get older, hybrid work changes, your family priorities change. Maybe you start traveling more or less, school preferences change. Sometimes people want more land later. Sometimes they want less maintenance later. Sometimes they want to be farther out now and closer into the city later. Sometimes they want close in now and more space later. So instead of trying to perfectly predict your forever house on day one, I think the better question is, what version of Charlotte fits your life best right now? while you're still giving good options for the next season. That is usually going to be the better move, because the truth is a lot of people do not move into their forever house first. They move into the house that helps them get to know the area, they get settled, they learn their routines, and they figure out what matters most when they are actually here. And there's nothing wrong with that. Honestly, that is usually going to be the smarter move. So here's my big takeaway from all of this. Most people do not end up living in the Charlotte that they imagined before they moved here. They end up living in the Charlotte that fits their real life, whether that's the lake dream that sometimes turns into lake access instead of lakefront, the uptown dream that turns into being close to the action instead of living right in the middle of it, the new construction dream that turns into choosing the right type of neighborhood and location, not just the newest house, the suburban dream that sometimes shifts into wanting better proximity, better convenience, and more connection to the core of our city. And none of that means that anyone got it wrong. It usually just means that they start getting more honest about how they actually want to live here. And that is when people make decisions that are just much better for themselves and their families overall. So if you are thinking about moving to Charlotte, or even just trying to narrow down where you might fit best, start with your lifestyle. Not the fantasy version, not vacation version, not what you're seeing on Zillow, your actual day-to-day life. Because once you get that part right, the areas are gonna start making a lot more sense for you, and you'll start finding out what really stands out. And if you are moving to Charlotte and you need help figuring that out, that is literally what we do every day. We talk to people every week who are trying to sort out whether they fit better in South Charlotte, maybe out on Lake Norman, down in Huntersville, Mooresville, Davidson, Fort Mill, Uptown, South End, or somewhere else entirely. So if that is you, please reach out at any time, call, text, or email, whatever is easiest. We are happy to help you map out this move and make it just a whole lot easier for you and your family. All right, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.